If I was buying my first investment property today for real estate, these are the things I would do and not do in that kind of order. The first thing I always recommend when buying your first investment property is to find a property that you can buy, but also live in some way, shape, or form. And what I mean by that is, depending on where you live, you want to look for a multifamily property or properties with accessory units, because if you can live in a property and live for free or less because you're generating income on that property, it makes it a much easier transition into being an investor and making a successful investment. More specifically at this point, there's not just multifamilies. You can buy a property as a second home, right, and use it part of the year. And on top of that, you could rent it short-term on Airbnb or VRBO to generate income and possibly pay the mortgage without having to live there full-time or be there full-time. So there's a couple of ways you can go about doing this, but the lower you can make your payment on that first investment property by generating income out of it to cover your lifestyle, not as well as just a property, the easier that's going to be for you. So that would be number one and first. Number two of things I would do and not do when buying my first investment property. I would make a long-term plan, not a short-term plan. Short-term investments are for experienced investors who know all the do's and don'ts. They've made all the mistakes. They could see things coming, and in the way they could do things fast and still make money. To do things in a fast amount of time, you need to be an expert at it or close to an expert at it to really make money on it. To make any kind of significant investment that makes you significant money. If you make a long-term plan, what I mean by long-term is anywhere between 5 and 7 years. You don't have to go further than that with real estate, but at least 5 or 7 years. If you make a 5 or 7 year plan for that property, you will outrun your mistakes. What I mean by that is I bought a property in Florida right before the crash. By the time the crash was over in 2008, that property was worth 70 cents on the dollar. At some point, it was even less than it was about 30 cents on the dollar. So I made a big mistake of buying a property in a place that was oversaturated, overpriced, overvalued, but in time, 10 years for me, I was able to outrun that problem, and that property came back to value and I made money on it. But if I would have needed to turn that property around in 2 or 3 years because it was a short-term plan, I would have lost money on it. So I think the most important thing you can do in anything with real estate is make a long-term plan. If in the short term you can trade that property and make money, then great. But if you have a long-term plan, you almost will never lose with real estate, because I was in the worst market that existed and it still came back and I made money, right? Number three, are you handy? Are you not handy? Who's taking care of the repairs on the property? Your properties need to be maintained. They need to be checked monthly, at least quarterly by you to see what's going on in that property. Nobody's going to take care of a property like you do. But if you are not handy and things come up, your tenants are going to want that stuff fixed immediately. And it could be big problems. It could be plumbing. It could be electric. It could be the roof is leaking. It could be a million different things. If you have to call emergency services for everything, it's going to cost you twice as much. If you have people on hand, so you have a list, these are my maintenance people, these are people I have a relationship, these are the people I'm going to call, you can head off some of these problems, first of all, by doing checkups quarterly, even with your plumber, your electrician, your landscaper, things like that. But more importantly, when you call them because you have a relationship with them, they're not going to charge you 3 times as much for emergency services. So you need to have people that if you can't fix the problem yourself, which I'm somebody who can't fix any of the problems myself, you need to have somebody who can actually fix those problems. So that's a definite do when buying a property, right? The other thing that I would say is, for your first real estate investment, do not jump on a trend. This is a hot trend, short-term rentals, property flips. Don't jump on a trend. Look for a truly tried and tested real estate investment policy or investment strategy that has worked for 20, 30 years, and there are plenty of them, right? Look for one of those for your first investment. Don't take on something super risky on your first investment. You want something that's a moderate gain, but you know your money is safe. One of the things I've done every single time I've come into some kind of money by selling a property, or my income was higher that year, is I've stuffed the money into a property that I knew was safe over the long term. So if I ever have to go get the money, I know I have access to it. I could sell the property. I could refinance the property. I'm getting a higher rental income for the property. I know it's there, right? So it's smart to make a safe investment up front. And this is very, very important. I'm going to make this the last thing, but it's super important. It could be the first thing. Don't depend on cash flow as income, especially for your first real estate investment. Cash flow is great. If you have a property that's making you a couple $1,000s a month, amazing. But even in that case, in most scenarios, you're going to have repairs that come in that eat up all your cash flow. You should always have 2 to 3 months of your mortgage payment in the bank. Why I'm saying that is because you need that reserve to pay for repairs. Hot water heater goes, you have plumbing issues, toilet goes, there's a crack in the roof, anything, you're going to need that reserve to pay for. You don't want to have to go borrow money to pay for repairs on your investment. You should always keep 2 to 3 months reserves on that property in the bank so you have money to cover yourself if something comes up. These are the things I absolutely would do if I was buying my first real estate investment. And by the way, they're tried and true for the rest of my investments for the rest of my career.